Parshas Chaye Sarah, and we call this Devar Torah the benefits of a good wife. So I hope your husbands will appreciate it. The Torah tells us that after Sarah dies, we know the story. Abraham is very distraught, and he goes to eulogize Sarah and to cry over her passing. He buries her in the Marat HaMachpelah. We know the whole story. Immediately after the story of how Abraham acquires the burial plot in Hebron, the Torah tells us at the very beginning of chapter 24, Ve'Avraham zakein bo bayomim, v'adoshem beiraches Abraham bakol. That Abraham was old, coming along in days, and Hashem blesses Abraham with everything. And this is the introductory pasuk to the story of how Abraham summons his servant Eliezer and tells him to go find a wife for his son Yitzchak. That's how the Torah introduces this story. So it's clearly a transition verse. It's a pasuk that's providing us some level of transition from the story of Sarah's burial to the story of finding a wife for Yitzchak. And so that's what we want to try and understand today, is that how this verse provides us with the proper segue from the story of Sarah's death and burial to the story of finding a wife for Yitzchak. And in the course of trying to discover this, I want to introduce you to a midrash in the Tanchuma, in the Warsaw edition of the Midrash Tanchuma, which is very bizarre, and hopefully will provide us with some perspective. Let's learn it together. Avraham zakein, that Abraham was old. This is source number 2 in your sheet. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua bar Nachmani. Rabbi Yehoshua bar Nachmani says, Mipnei arba'a devarim hazikna kofetzet al adam. That it is 4 things that cause a person to become old rapidly, to age rapidly. So you probably assume that it's children, right? Right? Well, that's actually one of them. You'll see in just a second. So let's see, what are the 4 things that cause a person to age rapidly? Number 1, mipnei hayirah. If a person experiences fear in life, that causes you to age. Person's hair grows. It was a hair-raising experience, or a person hair gets white from a very frightening experience. Number 2, mipnei ka'as banim, becoming aggravated with your children, right? I'm sure I don't have to tell you about that, right? That's what causes a person to become aged. Mipnei isha ra'ah, bad wife. This is referring to the male. A man becomes old if he has a bad wife. And number 4, mipnei hamilchamot, and because of war. War ages a person terribly, which we know, speaking to survivors. Okay, so now the Medrash is going to go through all 4. It says, Mipnei hayirah. How do you know that fear causes a person to age rapidly? Mi David. We know this from David HaMelech, as it says, V'lo yachol David aleches lefanav lidrosh Elokim, ki nivas mipnei cherev malach Hashem. That it says that David had at some point in his life a fear because of the sword of God, or because of the sword of the angel of God. And then Maksiv Achrav, and immediately after that verse it says, the David Zakein, that King David grew old. So the pasuk is just creating that connection in the verses that shows us that through David's fear he aged prematurely. Number 2, Mifnei Ka'as Banim, out of aggravation from your children. Me Eli. We learn this from the Eli, who was the high priest in the times of Shmuel Hanavi. He was the one that raised Shmuel from the time he was a small child. Dichsiv, as it says, Ve'eli zakein ma'od, v'shamas kol asher ya'asun banav l'chol Yisrael. That Eli became old after he had heard about all the bad things that his sons had done. Eli had sons who did not really follow so well in his footsteps. They were also Kohanim, but they were corrupt, and they did things. They took bribes from people who were bringing korbanos in the temple, and they would only serve people who paid them, under the table, so to speak. And so when Eli heard about this, he was extremely aggravated. It's probably one of the sources of the greatest aggravation is to have children that don't follow an ethical and moral path in life after all that we've done to try and instill that within them. So that was what caused him to have tremendous aggravation, and eventually he died from that aggravation. Number 3, mipnei hamilchamot. You see the Medrash slightly turns the order around, but that's okay. It does that sometimes. War causes a person to age prematurely. We learn this from Yehoshua. After Yehoshua waged the war with the 31 kings of Canaan, what does it say about him? The Yehoshua Zakein Babayamim, that Yehoshua became elderly. He became aged through all of his, it was hard fighting all those battles. And so it aged him. And finally, number 4, Mipnei Isha Ra'a, a bad wife. Dirsiv Vayhi La'es Zikna Shlomo, Nashav Hitu Es Levavo, Acharei Elohim Achirim. That it says that Shlomo got old at a time in his life when his wives turned his heart to worship other gods. So Shlomo HaMelech we know he had 1,000 wives, and some of those wives were idolatrous, and they turned his heart away, and he had bad wives. So because he had bad wives, he aged prematurely. Now, how the Medrash gets from 1,000 wives aging you to even one wife aging you, I'm not really sure. But the point is that according to the Medrash, it wasn't the quantity that aged Shlomo, but it was the quality of wife that aged him. You see this? Okay, so Shlomo gets old prematurely because his wives are not good people.
Does it work the other way too?
We have no indication. It's a good question. You have to find your own midrash. Go look on your own. Go find your own midrash. But the truth of the matter is that the midrash says that hakol holech achar ha'isha. Everything follows the woman. That if a good woman is married to a bad husband, it's her job to turn him around. Because, well, maybe we should speak afterwards. But in any event, Aval, Avraham, but now what's the contrast? Aval Avraham, Ishto Mechabedaso. His wife showed great respect to him. Vikara'aso Adoni, and she called him my master. Shenemar Va'adoni Zakein, as she said, my master is elderly. Remember when she laughed and she said, how could we have a child? My master is old. She didn't say Ba'ali Zakein. She didn't say my husband is old. She said my master. She had such great respect for him. Ve'aleha ne'amar Eishes Chayil Ateres Bala. And about Sarah, it's the whole Eishes Chayil was written for Sarah Imenu. There's a number of opinions as to what Eishes Chayil refers to. This medrash says that Eishes Chayil refers to Sarah Imenu. And and that's why it says in our pasuk that Hashem blessed Avram with everything. Hashem blessed Avram with everything, meaning that he was truly blessed because he had a wonderful wife. Not just a wonderful life, but a wonderful wife. Or wonderful wife equals wonderful life. So, I have a number of questions on this very bizarre midrash. The number of questions that I have is that this pasuk is describing how Avraham got old. It says, V'Avraham zakein ba'bayamim v'Hashem berachas Avraham ba'kol. So why is the midrash, which tells me that people age prematurely because of bad wives, why is this midrash being used in reference to a good wife, when really, if anything, the description of Avraham aging should be reflective upon the fact that he had a bad wife, not that he had a good wife? It doesn't really seem to make any sense. If you want to accentuate the fact that Avram was blessed because he had a good wife, then why write it right adjacent to the statement that Avram got old? It doesn't seem to make any sense, this midrash. And furthermore, when is this pasuk being written? She's dead already. So how can you tell me that Hashem blessed Avram with everything if she's already dead? So he's not blessed anymore with everything. So we have to really understand this midrash. It's a very strange midrash. You know, that Avraham, when he went to mourn for Sarah, it doesn't say that he went to lispod v'livkot l'Sarah. It doesn't say that he went to eulogize and cry for Sarah, but rather he went to lispod l'Sarah v'livkotah. He went to eulogize for Sarah, and he went to cry for himself. He wasn't crying for Sarah. Sarah was dead. She was in Gan Eden. He was very happy for her. He was very sad for himself. When Sarah died, when you lose something that's very precious to you, that's when you truly appreciate it the most. Avraham had appreciated Sarah all the time that they were married, but after she passed away, he had come to the realization of how truly blessed he had been all of those years. And that's a matter of fact why Rashi over here says in this transitional pasuk that Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. If you take a look in source number 3, just have the Rashi over here. It says Bakol Ole B'Gematria Ben. The word Bakol, if you take the numerical value of the word Bakol, what do you get? 2, well, Bet is 2, Chaf is 20, and Lamed is 30. 2 plus 20 plus 30 is 52. And the word Ben is 2 plus 50. That's also 52. So when the pasuk tells me that Hashem blessed Avram with everything, it means that Hashem blessed Avram with having a son. And Ume'achar shahayelo ben hayetzarach lahasio isha. And once Avram had a son, he had to marry him off. Now this is very strange. Yitzchak is now 40 years old at the time when this pasuk is being written. So he doesn't realize he's got to marry him off. Avraham realizes how truly enriched he had been his entire life when he sees how for the first time in his adult life how lonely he is without Sarah. And that's what triggers his need to marry off Yitzchak, is his own realization of how lonely he is. He thought, perhaps when he was married to Sarah, perhaps I can realize my potential whether I'm married, whether I'm not married. And it's only after Sarah is gone he comes to realize everything that I was, everything that I was able to accomplish was only because I was married to a good wife. I was married to Sarah. So now that he realizes that fully, he says, well, then how can my son Yitzchak ever realize his potential? Now I realize that I have to marry him off. I realize that I have to make sure that he gets married so that he can realize his potential as well. And that's why this whole story is adjacent to Sarah's death. And it's telling us also that when we take note of the fact that Avraham was elderly, we shouldn't assume that he became elderly because he was married to a bad wife. Just the opposite. Avraham became elderly because of all of the other things on the list. If you go through the list, you'll discover that Avraham experienced 3 out of 4. He experienced fear in his lifetime. When did he experience fear in his lifetime? Anyone know? When Sarah was taken, when he was captured by Nimrod and thrown into a furnace, when he had to contend with Avimelech, and he had to contend with Paro, with Sarah, and he had to contend with the war and fight against the 4 kings. Mipnei Kas Banim, aggravation from his children. What did Avraham have? Yishmael. So he had that aggravation, right? Mipnei HaMilchamos, here he was in the middle of a war with the 4 kings in order to be able to capture his nephew Lot back. The only thing the Medrash is trying to tell us that Avraham did not experience was the 4th item on the list was an Isha Ra. So don't think that when the Torah says that Avraham is Zakein B'Bayamim, it's because of an Isha Ra'ah. Just to the contrary, the very fact that Avraham now comes to the realization that he's got to marry off Yitzchak shows us that it's because of his understanding of how important it is to have a good wife, to realize your potential. And that's really the point of the Midrash. His old age was not a result of his wife, but rather was a result of all the other things that are contained on the list. Now it's interesting to note that because of this, you find that after Avraham took care of his son, what was the very next thing that he did? He got remarried. And as we know, this is generally the pattern that we find among widowers who had good marriages. We find that they can't wait to remarry. There's a saying that someone said to me, I don't know how true it is, but when a man loses his wife, Rachmana litzlan, they say, it's when we talk about shidduchim, by the shiva it's too early, by the shloshim it's too late. In other words, the idea is The idea is that if a man has is I don't think you should take it literally, but the point is that the idea is that when a man really had a meaningful relationship with his wife, and he realizes how important it is to be married in order to realize his potential. That's why he wants to get remarried. But Avraham, because he was a great tzaddik, says, how can I move on with my life before I take care of my son Yitzchak? So he's got to make sure that his son Yitzchak can realize his potential, his parental instincts as a responsible parent say, I need to take care of my son before I can take care of myself and move on with my life and continue to realize my potential. So I have to get my son Yitzchak married, and then I'll take care of myself. Ironically, if you think about it, Yitzchak was such a tzaddik that he was thinking about his father this whole time as well. And although we find sometimes in the world today that if a parent passes away, there's a certain resentment if the other parent wants to try and move on with their life and get remarried. Yeah. But in the case of Yitzchak, it wasn't that way. We know that Yitzchak, for example, where did he find Rivka? He was out in the field davening, nearby a place called Be'er Lachai Ro'i. You know where Be'er Lachai Ro'i was? This was the place where Hagar was last seen. And so Rashi tells us over there that what was Yitzchak doing? Yitzchak was trying to negotiate with Hagar to come back home because his father needed a new wife. And as a matter of fact, that's why he was davening there, because he knew that this is the place for shidduchim. This is the place where if my father will, Amir Hashem, find his old bashert will come back to him, so maybe I'll find my bashert there as well. And so that's what Yitzchak was doing there. So you see this tremendous affection that father and son have for each other, that Avram is working on finding a wife for his son before he can commence with the realization of the blessings in his life. And Yitzchak at the same time says, I can't find my shidduch and leave my father alone to be lonely. Now I'm going to go on with my life and my father's going to be alone. That's not right either. So they're constantly looking out for each other. If I was more cynical, I would say that one of the ways of looking at it is Yitzchak figured, if we don't get my father married off, then how am I going to have time alone with Rivka? He's going to be schlepping along the whole time. He's going to want to go bowling with me and go out to the movies, and I'm not going to have time with my new bride. So that's certainly one way, perhaps, of looking at it. But I think that the more correct way of looking at it is that he was concerned that if I'm going to move on with my life and find an Isha Tova, a good wife, and be able to realize my potential, I can't leave my father alone that way either. Yes?
Through this passage, you brought something to my mind. There was so much years between both Abraham and Yitzchak's marriage for their spouses. Is there any significance to that? Like Sarah was so much younger than Abraham, and Rivka was so much younger than...
Well, Sarah was only 10 years younger than Abraham.
I thought she was more.
No. The age gap between Yitzchak and Rivka was huge. There was a 37-year age difference. And between Yaakov was significantly older than Rivka, than Rachel and Leah as well. I don't think it wasn't as much as between Yitzchak and Rivka. The age gap between Yitzchak and Rivka was the most significant.
How could it be 37? He was 40.
Medrash says that she was 3 when they got married. There's another Medrash that says that she was 12, so you can learn it that way as well. Okay. Anyway, is there a significance to the age difference? I think that the attitude of Chazal, at least if we understand the timelines the way that Chazal portray them, is that our avos, our holy patriarchs, wanted to wait until they were mature spiritually before embarking on a spiritual career as a married man. In other words, that chapter of their lives when they had to realize their spiritual potential, which can only be done with a good wife, had to be done only after they had developed themselves on their own spiritually, had matured them on their own spiritually. And this seems to be the case with Yitzchak for sure, because the Akedah, there needed to be an Akedah before Yitzchak could get married to Rivka. It's immediately after Akedas Yitzchak that that they're ready. But I don't know that you necessarily have that experience with Avram and Sarah, though. It's an interesting contrast, because Avram and Sarah, we don't know how old they were. They could have been bar and bat mitzvah for all we know when they found each other and got married. They could have been married for decades.
But they were related, right?
They were cousins, yeah.
So then they knew each other.
They knew each other. They could have been married at a very young age. But the point there is that the development of Avram and Sarah took place together. They became Bali Tshuva, so to speak, together as a married couple, whereas with Yitzchak, for whatever reason, he needed to be developed on his own, individually, before he got married. So that in itself is an interesting study about how there are different models of marriage and different models of spiritual growth and development. But one thing is clear: to realize the potential, that can only be done once you're married and you have the Isha Tova. Yeah?
My parents and I are going to be married 60 years. My father always has a saying, he says, a good vav is a humble parnasa. So a good wife is half your livelihood.
Yeah.
The importance of a wife.
That's right, that's right. So, and what about the other half? Yeah. Okay.
Rabbi, but it's very different, Hagar, comparing Hagar and Rivka. Rivka was the one who picked up the torch of Iman, our mother.
Sure.
Because this is why when Sarah died, there is no more. We know that the Ochel of Sarah was the Beit HaMikdash would be.
Yes, but Avram was still completely productive once he married Hagar. His productivity may not have contributed to the development of the Jewish people, which is why it's not in the Torah. But it was nevertheless important for Avram personally.
But for Jewish people.
I understand, but we're talking about people as individuals now. Avram needed to be married in order to continue his growth. Have a great day, everybody.